I don't have her bio in front of me. I just know that you're associated with the Farmers Union and highly recommended for your work down in Madison, working with legislators, advocating for all kinds of things related to not only agriculture, but our environment in total. So with that, please share all your thoughts about Wisconsin today.
Great. Thank you, Dick. It's a pleasure to be here, and especially because Wisconsin Farmers Union has such a warm connection with Dunn County. Our former executive director, Tom Quinn, serves on the county board in Dunn County. We have had the real pleasure of helping to sponsor the Red Cedar Watershed conferences for a number of years, and we have an active and growing Dunn County Farmers Union chapter. Also, one of our most recent staff members to join the staff lives in Dunn County, Bill Hogseth, and Julie Cowan-Bomar lived for a number of years in Menominee. She's just recently moved to Chippewa Falls. So sorry you lost a Dunn County resident there. We still live in Chippewa County. But suffice it to say that there are a lot of points of connection for Wisconsin Farmers Union in Dunn County. And so this is especially exciting for me to get to talk with you all today. And, Dick and Kathy asked me to talk about water quality in particular. And then our conversation also touched upon some recent work that Farmers Union has been doing on climate change. And they thought that that might be of interest to the group members as well. So I'll talk about both of those things. I'm going to share my screen. And so you'll be able to see just a few items that I've put on up here on the slideshow. Get it to, there we go. And I'll certainly share these with Dick and Kathy afterwards so that you don't have to scribble down notes. We'll have any links and things like that available.
I took my picture off so you can see her slides.
Okay, do folks want to give me a thumbs up just to let me know that they can see the slides?
Yep, I can see them.
Okay, good. Well, first things first, I do want to give a recap of the Assembly Speaker's Water Quality Task Force that was underway throughout the 2019, and it coincided with Governor Evers' declaration of 2019 as the year of clean drinking water. I think the legislature and the Assembly in particular felt spurred or nudged into action on the issue of clean drinking water by the governor's declaration. And so Assembly Speaker Robin Vos appointed a task force of both members of the Senate and Assembly. They did what I thought was a commendable job of traveling around the state and taking testimony from a lot of different groups and individuals. However, the key message, the key take home from the Water Quality Task Force is that none of these bills made it to the governor's desk. That's, so no matter how many hours they put into listening, no matter how much time they spent working on the bills, they will not make any impact on water quality because they haven't passed. And in fact, they never passed the Senate, and so therefore they never made it to the governor's desk. That was a big disappointment for Wisconsin Farmers Union. There were 13 bills in the overall package. There were 5, the ones that you see on the screen here, that Wisconsin Farmers Union in particular supported. And these were the ones that had the greatest nexus to agriculture and in rural communities too. I think you'll see on here, for example, conservation staffing for county conservation departments and better funding for testing and mapping efforts. And I know that Dunn County has thought about and maybe even pursued well testing drives. I'm seeing nod there. That's a really good way to turn the light bulb on for people that all is not well with my drinking water. But they're expensive. And so the AB 800 might have provided some support for those kinds of well testing drives and getting that data mapped so that people can see a visual representation for it. So from Farmers Union perspectives, there were some good initiatives and proposals in the Water Quality Task Force package, and it was a big disappointment that those didn't pass. I think that what you might hear from a legislator, especially in the Senate now, would be, well, we were all, there was momentum there, but then the pandemic hit and gosh, we just had to leave Madison and we didn't get those things done. I would challenge that. Well before any of us had ever heard of COVID-19, there was inaction on the part of the Senate in bringing these bills to the floor. One of part of the thinking is that many of them cost some money, and Senate Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald is running for Congress. And one of the ways that someone running for Congress can boost their fiscal budget hawk bona fides is by not passing anything that costs money. And so one of the hypotheses was that these bills were getting blocked in the Senate because of that unwillingness by Majority Leader Fitzgerald and several other real fiscal budget hawks to bringing them to the floor. At that time, we did have money available in the budget. It is a much worse budget picture now because tax revenues are way, way down because of the pandemic. Let's talk in light of that. Well, I'll pause and see if anybody has any questions. We have a small enough group that I think people could just unmute themselves and ask questions, or you could put it in the chat box if you like. All right, I'll keep going, but just know that if at any point you want to ask a question, I'd love that, especially with the group the size. That's great. So what can we do to take action given this state of affairs? It's a pro that we had some good thinking that went into what would be helpful for water quality. That's a big task, and there was a lot of good research and thinking that went into writing those bills. So we have them in hand. Number one, during this campaign season, let's hold legislative candidates accountable, especially in the majority party, for the fact that none of these bills made it to the governor's desk. All of them passed in the assembly. None of them passed in the Senate. And so for those Senate candidates in particular, it's worth asking, where did you stand and why did these not make it to the finish line? Second item here is one that I didn't mention before. There were also some rules that would have been very helpful in strengthening regulations governing large livestock facilities. They were halted very abruptly in November 2019, concurrent with Brad Paff being ousted from the DATCAP secretary spot. Those rules would have done things like make sure that local governments had a say and had the ability to require livestock operations to be financially responsible for any damage they cause. It would be great to see those gain momentum again. So that's a question that is worth asking Governor Evers if you have that opportunity at an event. What's happening with those CAFO rules and when can we expect to see them move along? Third item, March 2021. In every year for the past decade, I would say, or every budget year in the past decade, the Joint Finance Committee, that's the Legislative Budget Writing Committee, has held listening sessions. And so those are always in odd numbered years. That's the budget writing year of the biennium. And in the past, they've held those listening sessions at maybe 5 sites around the state. And citizens can come and testify. Usually it's limited to 3 minutes. But if you have a critical mass of people, that are all echoing the same message, that can really be effective. And I'd say the group that I think was most effective 4 years ago in changing the course of the budget discussion was Advocates for Public Education. And they came out in such force to those budget listening sessions that they just could not be ignored. I could imagine something like that happening with water quality this year, because we had such good ideas and that came to nothing. And so I think it could be a very powerful message this year. We need to fund these priorities because clean drinking water can't wait. There's a big question mark about how those will unfold in light of the pandemic. My hope, but I don't have any particular insider knowledge on this. My hope is that they will hold them virtually. And that might make it even easier for people to participate rather than having to travel and sit for a long time waiting for their turn. At least, you can sit in the comfort of your own home waiting for your turn to testify. And my hope is, that they've done that for several task forces, including the Climate Change Task Force, and now with the Rural Prosperity Commission that I'll talk about in a moment, tested out this idea of virtual listening sessions. So I hope that will go into the budget process.
This is Lindsay. I just want to share one thing real quick. I did try to participate in those climate task force, but my internet is so terrible. I live in a rural area that my voice could not be heard. I kept on cutting out. So while I agree with you, I think some of these virtual opportunities is absolutely providing an easier mechanism for folks. We absolutely have to understand that there are a good chunk of us living in rural Wisconsin who do not have effective internet.
That's so true. Yes, it's so true. And
so then I feel like my voice was not heard, and it was a very frustrating experience for me. So when you mentioned the listening sessions, and I'm always anxious about listening sessions because I always think they're just a way to get us all anxious about a bunch of meetings and then nothing ever passes legislatively. I try to have a better attitude, but lately it's been pretty poor.
Yes, these are, two great points. One is we just have a crying need for better rural internet. And the second is that it's always fraught a little bit for me to encourage people to go to a listening session, knowing that sometimes they don't result in action by the body.
Yep.
What I say to people is, if I participate and I'm ignored, then I have a clean conscience and I've done my part. If I didn't show up and still got ignored, then that's entirely, that's in part on me. So it's hard to know exactly whether your voice is going to make a difference. I feel like, and sometimes it takes not the first try, but the second or the third, and the momentum. It's also always more effective if a lot of people are speaking together. So being part of a group that's presenting a united message, that was the lesson that I took from the public education advocates, is that they were really organized. And so find a group that is speaking a message that you care about and getting a critical mass of people to all echo the same message. We'll talk about non-web-based ways to give input too on some of these items.
Karen, before you go on, and maybe you're going to say this in the future anyway, in anticipation of those listening sessions, and even in anticipation of our writing in our comments, does the Wisconsin Farmers Union plan to get bullet points out? So we talk about that kind of common concern that we have. Will you be getting those out to your members and others?
Yes, I expect that we will. That's something that we've certainly done in the past. So this is an invitation, a good opportunity to invite all of you to join Wisconsin Farmers Union if you're not a member already. And what that will mean is that you'll get our emails and our newsletters that come in the mail. usually once a month. And those are the vehicles by which we disseminate those talking points, as well as Facebook. And you can like us on Facebook at any time. But we really love your membership, and that will make sure that we're in touch with you when these opportunities arise.
How do we become members?
Pardon me?
What is the membership process?
$30 per year. Fourth opportunity is in the face of inaction from the state legislature. I encourage all counties to investigate opportunities for water quality education and protection at the county level. And I expect that you could give me a presentation on the efforts that Dunn County has taken in that regard. And I just want to encourage you to keep up that work, because I really see counties stepping in to fill the vacuum in the face of inaction on the state level. And so those water quality testing drives are very effective. Efforts to do groundwater testing and mapping are really helpful. And whatever support the county can give to county land and water conservation staff is also very valuable, as well as supporting any farmer-led watershed initiatives that are in formation in your county or your area. And then the last item that I'll mention here is that Wisconsin Farmers Union this fall is undertaking what we're calling deep canvassing. That is, I'll put it as, it's talking instead of shouting. And we're inviting our members and anyone who wants to participate to learn a technique of talking in a deep way with other citizens and neighbors about the issues that they care about. And one of the particular issues that we'll be talking with people about is protecting and making sure that the right regulations are in place for a large livestock facility in Polk County. And so Wisconsin Farmers Union members will be calling voters and citizens in Polk County to ask them what they know and share thoughts about what that would mean for Polk County, where there were, if a large livestock pork facility were to come in there. We'll also be talking with voters about healthcare and about nonpartisan redistricting. There's a lot of energy in our membership about this effort. And so if you would like to learn more about it, please contact me or Bill Hogsett, Steve's son, or just check out this blog post here, and you'll get the link to that in the presentation. I'm going to speed up here a little bit for the next portions. I'll pause though. Any questions?
You know, I do. I'm not attended the training about the deep canvassing, but one of the things that would be helpful is I live in a sea of very politically conservative people, and I just wonder if WFU has talking points. I understand part of the deep canvassing is talking about issues from my perspective, and I get that, and listening to them about their perspective. But part of it, do you have talking points relative to what are the conservative positions? That would be helpful as well.
Probably the best resource I could point you to is the deep canvassing, because the idea there is, and this is maybe a little bit counterintuitive, that people generally aren't swayed by facts. They're swayed by stories. And we connect with people not about facts, but about stories. And so,
stories.
Yeah. Okay. Right. And so that's precisely at the core of the deep canvassing idea, is that if we talk about what we care about, what we love about our community, what's important to us, what makes us angry, what makes us want to take action, we're a lot more likely to find common ground than if we're just kind of, trying to one-up each other with data.
nice, and she's great, she's great.
Let me just pop over to one other item on my screen here that just came out today or yesterday, I think, and that is the Wisconsin Conservation Voters Scorecard for 2019-2020. And I'll share this, a link to this along with the presentation to Dick and Kathy. But that it gives a nice recap of what happened on water quality issues in the last legislative session, and I think does a pretty good job of painting a picture. It will also touch on things like PFAS legislation that Farmers Union has not engaged on very much, but Conservation Voters has, in case you're interested in the PFAS code as well. Okay, climate change is another topic that is really tied in, and Farmers Union sees farmers as both some of the first canaries in the coal mine who are affected by changing climate patterns and more extreme weather events, and also some of the people who are most in a position to change our carbon intensive economy, and potentially even to find economic benefit by growing cover crops or bioenergy crops, or by producing renewable energy on farm. And so farmers are both affected by and potential resources in combating climate change. The Wisconsin Farmers Union premiered a video featuring farmers talking about climate change and the role of soil health in combating climate change. I'm just going to check in regarding time. Do we have time to show that? It's about 6.5 minutes.
I like to say that our whole agricultural food system is based on a couple inches of topsoil and the fact that it rains. But what if it doesn't rain, or what if it rains too much? Farmers are really vulnerable to weather patterns, but we also have a great strength to challenge and make a difference.
CSA farms, I think, are along with all other farms, and that weather is the driving force of how we operate. The last 3 Aprils, we've had dumps of snow, which is not common. Like 30 inches one spring, 17, and we had snow again this April.
Last year was the wettest year in the history of the state of Wisconsin, and it posed a lot of challenges for farmers. Navigating these changing weather patterns is just another challenge that farmers face in what's becoming a harder and harder economy to make a living.
You know, it's 2020 and we've all read about the Dust Bowl, but yet we still haven't figured out a way to make that any better than what it was. What we try to do is mostly no-till whenever we can, and typically you're not disturbing the soil. You've got kind of a heavier duty corn planter to punch through all the residue and everything else to put the seed in the ground at proper depth. And cover crops, basically that's just trying to protect the soil from runoff and high temperatures and all that kind of stuff to try to keep soil life alive and to try to get some of your fertility that way instead of commercial fertilizer all the time.
If you dig out in my pastures that have not been tilled in 20 plus years, the soil is going to be really soft, pliable, fluffy, a lot of root structure and worms. The benefits of managed grazing in regards to the environment are multifaceted. There's a lot less inputs, both in seed and fertilizer, in fossil fuels, in labor. My pastures are perennial, so it's kind of mimicking natural ecosystems. They are very high diversity, which support a lot of natural wildlife. So you'll see snakes and lots of different grass-fed birds, a lot of bugs compared to a tilled field where there's just a lot less to support wildlife or soil biology.
Certainly crop rotation helps, and the more crops you grow, the better for more diversity. You look into nature and you don't just see a pine plantation and that's all that was out there unless it was planted that way. There's a reason why you look at a prairie and there's hundreds of different species of stuff.
It's so important for all farmers, large scale, mid scale, small scale, even if you have a garden, to really pay attention to that water, your soil, and think of it holistically and kind of climate smart. When you see a tractor plowing through a field and you can see the dust cloud behind it because it's a windy day and they're losing topsoil and flooding and erosion and all of that, if you were to implement some cover cropping or some stabilizing plants, it would bring nutrients back down into your soil that you could go ahead and use for your crop.
There's a lot of roles that farming can play in mitigating climate change. The first is to shift our system to a less carbon-intensive model, where a lot of the inputs that we are using, whether it's diesel or fertilizer, produce a lot of carbon in their production. We're going to need legislation that's going to incentivize a dramatic shift in the way we produce food, incorporating practices like managed grazing, no-till farming, to use cover crops, to have diverse rotation of crops year-round, so that we're taking advantage of the soil and its natural capacity to pull carbon out of the atmosphere and store it in the ground where it belongs. The biggest challenge that we face in changing the way we farm across the landscape is just getting people to try something new and getting people to take one step forward in a new direction, even though it might be challenging, even though there might be an unknown component to it. But that first step is often the hardest for a farmer to take because farmers have their system that they know and that they use and that they trust. What gives me hope is thinking about a version of reality where we respond to the challenges we're facing right now with the courage that this moment requires.
I think we have a chance because there's a lot of young generation farmers stepping into the scene, and so now is the time for them to learn what other options there are.
I think that this could be a really big kind of turning point. I think that farmers should realize the power that we have to better our environment and take the reins and do what we can.
You know, we're at a point where we definitely need to change a lot of things that we've been doing in the past, and it's obvious to me that the environment's changing. I think there's certainly things that we can all do to make a change, and we all need to do our part to do it.
Can you see that now?
No.
Okay.
I don't have the PowerPoint up yet. There we go.
There it is.
Okay. Guys I appreciate your patience. So you may have heard that Governor Evers convened a climate change task force this year. And we were delighted at Wisconsin Farmers Union to have our colleague Bill Hogseth serve as one of the committee chairs for the land and the land use subcommittee of that climate change task force. We also had a number of our members participate in the public comment opportunities, and as discussed earlier, it is really disappointing when the internet doesn't work to enable participation in that. They did invite written comments, but that window is closed. when the window that will open up in the future that I invite people to seize upon is that the task force will deliver its recommendations and ostensibly make those recommendations public around October 31st. When there's an event like that, one of the things that I have observed in the government relations world is that a lot of times there's a flurry of press coverage and legislative or agency attention to that topic. It's a window. And in advocacy, it's always helpful to look for those windows and time our action as citizens accordingly. So there will be a window of opportunity when those recommendations become public in October or November. This would be a really great opportunity to get your fingers to the keyboard, your pen to paper, and write an op-ed or a letter to the editor if climate change is something that is of concern to you. Because there'll be you can write it in response to the release of the recommendations of the task force. It's also, this will be, right before the election. And so it's also worthwhile at those candidate forums or candidate events to ask legislative candidates, are you going to support the recommendations of the Climate Change Task Force? And then finally, there may be recommendations in that report that are relevant to county government. And so once having those recommendations endorsed by a state level task force could give momentum to a call at the county level to take action on items that the county could take action on. For example, counties can shift their facilities to using renewable energy or reduce the carbon demands of the county fleet of dump trucks or the county nursing home getting solar panels. Any of those ways that counties use energy can be shifted to being more green, and collectively that would make a real big difference. Counties spend a lot of money and use a lot of energy, so that's an opportunity. And here again, going back to the budget listening sessions, this would also be a topic that you could bring up at those budget listening sessions in 2021, in that February, March, April timeframe. Any questions there?
Not a question, Kara, but I got one piece of information for Farmers Union across the state, is that the Wisconsin Conservation Voters organized a walk that just went from UW Stout's campus up to the city government offices. And that was a march for introducing the climate change efforts to reduce our impact by 2030. The mayor wasn't willing to meet with us, but we went right outside his door and just spent some time talking about climate change and walked back to the campus. It had made the papers, and it became, then Menominee became one of the first cities in the, well, at least in the county, I don't know about the state, but to embrace that 2030 initiative. So you may want to recommend that to other groups working with Wisconsin conservation voters, and somehow just get out there in front of people, like you said, is another way to make an impact.
That's great, Dick. I didn't know about that. I'm delighted to hear about it.
Contact Kate Beaton.
Pardon me?
Contact Kate Beaton.
Okay, yeah. That's great.
Yeah, and I guess I also would have to say I run a land trust called Landmark Conservancy, and we are doing climate resiliency with land protection and modeling. It's really trying to get at biodiversity. And so I get a little nervous with climate discussions that seem to back away from environmental issues and concerns. I've done climate work in Alaska, northern Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and the energy issue is huge and significant. But how we protect lands right now could have a profound impact for future generations. And we're going to be transitioning land ownership at the highest rate in the nation's history. Just so we're clear, you got a lot of people selling property. Some of this property really should be protected for our children and grandchildren, but I find it's virtually impossible to get folks to embrace land protection within the framework of resiliency and climate. I know that Gathering Waters is trying to help provide some influence. Now, we're on the cutting edge landmark, and we're also trying to align other land trusts to do this work. But I just feel like, in general, we're not very aligned as a bunch of conservation organizations or organizations who have members who really care about these issues, that we're not as coordinated as I would have hoped we would be, I guess. And that's no offense to you, it's just a general observation.
Yeah. I can't tell your name. Can you say your name?
Oh, my name is Lindsay Ketchell, so I'm the Executive Director of Landmark Conservancy, and we work in 20 counties. We've got about 206 conservation easements. We have 69 properties open to the public, and we're actively, constantly pursuing land protection for both community empowerment, but the resiliency is a new frame we're working on.
That's really wonderful, Lisa, and I hope that we can follow up separately from this. And you're absolutely right. It can be like herding cats. It's a lot of different groups doing really wonderful things, not necessarily coordinated together. But that's great to know that the conservation frame is coming through in the land conservancy community.
And I'm very open to figuring out how to improve the cats.
Yeah.
But I'm new. I've only been here for a couple of years, so I don't really know a lot of the personalities. But that's one thing that I have been observing is there is in Wisconsin a little need for a better, alignment or something. Something seems off, and I understand the Senate and the Republicans are a huge barrier. But I also kind of feel like internally, and that's part of what HEAT is about here, is really trying to align our groups locally in a county level. And trying to see if we can build that out a little bit more too.
Sure. Thanks for that.
Yep.
The last topic that I wanted to touch on that I think ties in with a lot of the things that we've already talked about is rural prosperity, very broadly. Governor Evers convened a Blue Ribbon Commission on Rural Prosperity. He announced this in his State of the State address in January. And that commission met for the first time just last week on August 14th. This will be a venue for all of us to weigh in on topics that will enhance, that are holding back rural areas and that where we really need state action to enhance rural prosperity. And several of them have already come up here. The preservation of open spaces, working lands, and natural lands, like Lisa just talked about. The crying need for better rural broadband, as was mentioned before, being an impediment to being an active citizen and taking part. And I see clean water as a critical rural prosperity. What do our rural communities rely on? Agriculture and tourism are two big ones. And both of those industries critically rely on clean water, not to mention, how do you attract people to a community, young people, families, how do you attract them to a community when you have to explain to them, the well that in that house that you're thinking of buying doesn't have clean drinking water. That's just a non-starter for a lot of people. So consider this an invitation to take an active role in this Blue Ribbon Commission on Rural Prosperity. So there are three ways that people and groups can get involved with that commission. There are 3 public forums. Those will be online. So but I do think that you could call in rather than using video conferencing, just like some people on the call here are. Those are August 31st, September 8th, and September 16th. And you can see the times listed here. You can also submit written comments through the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation website. That's listed here on the slide. And then you can invite members of the commission to come to your organization to have a conversation or give a presentation. So having some kind of two-way communication with members of the Rural Prosperity Commission. Let me just pause here to give kind of an editorial comment about the Wisconsin Economic Development Corporation, WEDC. WEDC has been in the news a lot, was in the news a lot during the Walker administration for some of the unaccountable money that was handed out to, you know, kind of corporate cronies and campaign donors and things like that. And it was also very involved in the Foxconn deal that raised a lot of eyebrows and raised a lot of questions. I will say that I've seen a big change in WEDC in the past 2 years. And it has a lot to do with 3 people who are key figures in the newly configured WEDC and the new administration. One is Missy Hughes, who's the commissioner or secretary, anyway, the head of WEDC. She used to work for Organic Valley, and now is there at WEDC. One of the challenges that always existed with WEDC is that it seemed like they didn't understand rural Wisconsin at all. It was almost completely Madison and Milwaukee focused, and there was not a lot of attention to, or the design of programs was not well suited to rural Wisconsin. I'm really seeing a shift there, and I think that has a lot to do with the fact that Missy Hughes comes from Viroqua, Wisconsin, or spent the last chunk of her career in Viroqua, a rural area, and at a farmer-owned cooperative. Then there are also a couple other people, Sam Rickers, with good background in rural development, and Kellyanne Pazek there at WEDC as well. All that is to say, don't write WEDC off, and especially this opportunity, this Commission on Rural Prosperity. I'm really seeing a new face of WEDC, and it's almost like the real potential of the economic development engine at the state level is coming to fruition. So that's pretty exciting, and I've been really pleased to see that. Any questions about that?
No, but Kara, we're going to have to wrap up.
Yeah. Great. Well, those were the 3 main topics that I wanted to share, and the opportunities for citizen engagement. Water quality, climate change, rural prosperity. And so, and all of these, again, are very, very relevant to the budget discussion that will happen next year. So members of Wisconsin Farmers Union will get information and talking points. So again, we invite you to become members so that you can get that information. And we're really happy to partner with any of the other organizations that you might be members of as well. So thank you all so much for the work that you do as advocates and citizens. And thanks so much for inviting me to be here today.
Well, thank you, Kara. I really appreciate your time and the good presentation. We do invite you to stay tuned if you have the time or desire to stay with the business meeting, because a lot of the topics we're going to talk about do address how do you reduce the silos that we have across Wisconsin and work more together collectively to make an impact, especially on the legislation you're talking about. If you don't have time to stay with us, I want to leave you with one thought, and that is stay tuned with Tom Quinn about the Red Cedar Conference coming up for next March, because we are partnering with the Wisconsin Lakes Organization and UW Extension. There is going to be a water week, the second week of March for next year, all online. And that will be something that can really enhance the education about water across Wisconsin.
That's so great. And here's an offer that I'll make, right now for that. We always compile an email list of all the legislators, and so we'll have to update that after the election. It's kind of cumbersome to put it together, but I would love for every state legislator to get the information about Water Week. So look to Wisconsin Farmers Union for that list, if nothing else, you know, and getting that information.
Okay.
You know, I was wondering if I could just make a comment. And, you know, when I think about our organization here, when I say our organization, I'm talking about our HEAT, our Dunn County HEAT group. And then seeing what you presented, Kara, those various assembly bills, and by no means do I know the details of all the bills, so I'm not going to pass any deep judgment. But my sense is it's not only Wisconsin, but it's nationally. I mean, you mentioned climate change, and we've even seen it more now in the pandemic. We have seen this anti-science posture from the conservative side. I mean, we know it's been going on for decades regarding climate change. And then when you see the anti-science posture on this pandemic, it just kind of makes you want to throw up your hands. But I think of our HEAT initiative, and then I see those science bills that I don't know if they're dead or they're just stuck or they're going to sit there forever. But I think of people. I think of people in general. All these water quality issues and air and taking care of our soils and protecting our watersheds. I have to believe that, I mean, I can't imagine people not being in favor of that. You know, it just borders on just raw common sense. And it just seems that if it's something that's brought up by somebody on the progressive side or the environmental side, it is just automatically given a thumbs down. And it's very disheartening, especially when you feel that people think just the opposite. So it's my editorial comment, and I don't expect any, I'm just making a comment, an observation.
Okay.
Dick, I'd like to slip in one other request of Kara, and then I'll shut up, you know, and I know we're way off time. But
Yeah.
Kara, one of the things that we're wanting to do as a group, you know, the HEAT group, is to do a gap analysis. What's missing in the conservation efforts we're making in Dunn County? Since you touch a lot of different counties, obviously, if you find some particularly innovative techniques or things that you see missing in counties, we would love to have your perspective. You know, we live in Dunn County, and you know, and I think there's a lot of, we're in the process of learning, there's a lot of wonderful things. But if you see something that you think, wow, that is really innovative, or this is what the county is, or this is what I see missing in every county, would you please let us know that, and we can share it with the group?
Sure.
Thank you. I'm done, Dick. I promise not to ask
I
anymore.
think we need to move on to our agenda.